The Rugby Championship might be over and the Wallabies won't be playing another test for a good 6 weeks, but that doesn't mean that the rugby stops, and not least the discussion around it. And Matt Tamua, as always, you're going to be joining me to talk rugby.
Looking forward to it, Christy. Disappointing on the weekend, but some positive signs as well. So, plenty to dissect.
So if you missed it, a 33-13 loss for the Wallabies across the ditch in Wellington. The curse was reversed, as Scott Barrett said, following the Saturday match. The Box, though, claimed the Rugby Championship with a 47-7 thumping over Los Pumas. So we'll be talking that. We'll be talking what happens for the upcoming spring tour, where the Wallabies attempt to do the impossible by claiming a first Grand Slam since 1984. Not sure that will happen, but there will be plenty of discussion, especially given some of the faces that might be touring, including Joseph Suwali. So a lot to come on this, the Raw Rugby Podcast. 33-13 defeat, Matt. And at one point in time, when the Wallabies were up 13-10, you thought, there could be a chance here. It was actually 13-11, I think. But the Wallabies showed so much in that first half, particularly in the first 15, 20 minutes. It was a complete contrast to a week earlier in Sydney. But yet again, the AB's too much class. They dominated the second half, particularly the opening stages of the second half, and they ran away with it.
Yeah. I honestly thought it was a pretty decent performance. I think you heard all week talking about a fast start, and we did that, which was, in contrast to the week before. Ultimately, we ran the ball a lot more, which is great, and it's exciting, and you see the positives of it, but you probably saw some of the downsides as well, that when you turn that over, the Kiwis are just lethal. Particularly, I think Noah might have turned one over around the halfway, and the Kiwis are just... Yep, they can make something out of nothing, and guys like Caleb Clark just come. They're amazing to watch, really, at broken field play. So look, positive signs though. I thought hopefully we can build and use that kind of template in terms of our attack, and our defense was a lot better compared to last week as well. So yeah, not the result, but in a weird way, maybe part of the performance that we're after.
Well, okay, we'll break down some of the more specific things in a little bit, but what about the attacking philosophy and the ambition that they showed there? Right from the outset, the scrum feed with Taniela, who looks like he was in all sorts. It was later revealed by Joe Schmidt that it was just a bit of knee on knee and he almost needed to run it off. But from the outset, great sweeping play around the back of the scrum, around that 10-metre line or so, or halfway line, and a kick in behind from Andrew Kellaway. Beauden Barrett couldn't clean it up, but Jake Gordon, he'll be kicking himself that he didn't just dive on the ball rather than trying to scoop it up and then ground it. But they did show that ambition early on. So two things. One, what do you like about that? Because it doesn't always correlate to trying to attack, play running rugby, succeeding. But on this occasion, it was a bit of a contrast to what we'd seen from Joe Schmidt's sides in the first 8 tests of his tenure with the Wallabies, which has been kick-heavy and territory-based.
Yeah, look, and it's interesting away from home that we chose to run it, but it in my view, it worked. Look, I think with what we've seen from Joe, particularly, is his ambition to want to play from scrums, particularly if we have a semi-decent scrum at the point, which is good. We've seen a few, 50-22 way back. We've seen a few of these
from Tom Wright.
Yeah. We've seen some little sweeps around, which is scrum attacks really, really evolved in the last 5-10 years. It used to be quite predictable in the sense that, you'd go in with a move and you play the move. Nowadays, teams are calling things on the run. They'll go in, they'll see the picture, then they'll swap, and then they'll call it last minute. And I think Australian rugby's probably taken a little while to adjust to it, but you're seeing Joe really empower guys, and it's the positive side of having a guy like Andrew Kellaway, Tom Wright in your back three, because they're talkers, they're communicators, and so they can see the picture, they can see that it's changed. Caleb Clark's probably sweeping open, so then he calls the dummy down the blind side. So, it's nice seeing that part of it evolve. It's, and I think that's probably definitely been a trend of Joe's, him wanting to attack the blind side a lot. We're seeing, Taniela and Fraser or Harry going down the blind side, when there's only 6-7 meters, really trying to get some meters there. And then just, a lot of pick and drives in around inside the 22. So definitely starting to see a little bit of a DNA there.
Yeah, there's probably not a better person than Joe Schmidt in terms of he's very well known for his catalogue of players, and this is kind of the DNA of Joe Schmidt. So it's no surprise that he's got coming up with all these gems, particularly off set piece play. But it wasn't just set piece play. I think it was about the 9th, 10th minute off the kick reception where the Wallabies from the 22-metre line spread it through the hands, some lovely hands from Fraser McWright, and really well picked up from Tom Wright to unleash Len Ikitau. And he got on the outside, and it started this amazing attacking movement, which involved Dylan Peach and Paisami. And unfortunately, a push pass from Paisami to Nick Frost went forward, and that broke it down. But that was intriguing to see because it kind of reminded me of what Michael Cheika almost was wanting to do in 2019, which was to run and perhaps run at all costs. But you're right to say that it was, particularly given it was overseas and it was not on Australian soil, to be doing this. It took a lot of people by surprise with their ambition and their endeavour. Yeah,
and it's in a weird way, it's they went there to try and win the game, not just not lose in that sense. So that was good. And look, we've seen bits of this. I don't think by any means this was like a standalone game that we're like, oh my gosh, what happened here? We've seen bits and pieces of it. I just felt we probably executed a bit better. Even our short little passes, there's been a bit of comment about, the forwards tipping and no looking and out the back and all that kind of stuff. But just starting to see that now. And unfortunately at Test Rugby, you just don't have that time and space. So a lot of your passes they've got to be quicker, and you've got to go off instinct and feel, and you can't exactly look, spot the target and pass. You just don't have that time. So I think guys are now trusting that. They're understanding the system a bit better, and it's exciting. And like I said, I think the defense was probably something that was, noticeably different. It was an improvement, wasn't it?
Yeah,
massively so. They actually put the Kiwis under pressure, and we seemed like we held that intensity for most of the game as well. So, like I said, there were some really positive signs. Obviously, you never like losing a game, but being a bit pragmatic or a realist, there were definitely some positive signs there.
Yeah, no surprise that they lose there, and given that it's the last win on New Zealand soil was way back in 2001, but. Defensively, there still were a few holes. Like, we can't completely gloss over that. It's to be expected that the All Blacks are going to create opportunities. I thought we saw once again Wallace Atiti, how damaging he is, how much he can just break the line and then release teammates. And I loved seeing Anton Leonard-Brown at 12. I just think he straightens the line. He's so good in contact, and his decision-making is outstanding. And his ball that he put on the chest of Severis, that's a difficult thing for a left to right pass to put on a bloke that's running 25 kilometres, 30 kilometres an hour to then skin his opposite number there. So that was brilliant. But if there's probably one or two moments to highlight defensively, like one, it was a bit of an overtrack from Fraser McWright, I think, on Will Jordan that allowed Jordan to step back on his left foot. He won't be happy with that. But then Nick Frost jumping out of the line, he bit on his inside man, which allowed Caleb Clark to score on the stroke of halftime as well. So that's another one where Frosty last week, I think it was 4 or 5 missed tackles that he made in Sydney, and often it was just trying to put on the big hit rather than staying with that cohesive line connection. But they're just so damaging because there was a box kick from Jake Gordon on around the 22-metre line, and it just didn't quite have the legs. It didn't have the height. It went a bit too far. And then you saw the ABs just counter, and they countered through time, and you just can't give them an inch, can you?
No, you can't. As I said, they're broken field specialists, and it's often why we've struggled against the Kiwis is because we like to play rugby as well. But with that's going to come mistakes, and then you get it in the hands of guys like Clark or Will Jordan when they're in the mood that they were. But yeah, look, the defensive system's been a bit of a surprise to me. So a lot of those holes that they're hitting, those inside gaps, they're very much because we're doing this kind of drift D, which most teams these days aren't. Most teams are going, up and in, really taking, line speed and kind of going rugby league styles a bit. So yeah, it's interesting to see us do that. Yeah. Why? I'm not sure. It might be a case of we're spending, because we're holding onto the ball a lot in attack, or we're trying to hold the ball on an attack. We're expending a lot of energy, so we need to kind of save our gas in the defensive line. But yeah, like I said, you see those gaps that they're going through. It's very much someone drifting, and yeah, unfortunate in that sense. But yeah, we'll see how it evolves, I guess. Fraser's done really well. It's been nice seeing him develop. Even Frosty, he's someone that you want to love, because you can see he just puts everything into it. And he makes a few errors here and there, but he genuinely cares and tries. And he's one of those kind of players that you want to root for, which is good.
Yeah, I said at the time, I thought it was Jerry Williams, his best test, I thought, defensively, and he showed some great subtle footwork, an agile second rower at the moment. Whether or not he eventually finds himself at 6 remains to be seen. But I thought, and I said it in the Instant Reaction podcast, and I certainly thought it after watching the game a second time back and replay, that the try on the stroke of halftime was the real killer. I thought a killer blow, given how much the Wallabies had thrown at the All Blacks in the first half. They went scoreless in the second half, and they had some opportunities, didn't they? And I thought Noah Lolesio started to come into the game a little bit more, but you've got to take your chances, and unfortunately they didn't. Harry Wilson dropping a ball close to the line. We saw Fraser McWright held up earlier in the first half. They probably just weren't clinical enough in the 22. Like, they had to work so hard for their points. The All Blacks, on the other hand, managed to score their tries without necessarily a huge amount of effort. They weren't necessarily getting 10, 15 phases through. They managed to penetrate that line often.
Yeah, and we're not getting a whole lot of love from our rolling maul as well. So it really puts the emphasis around that kind of pick and drive. And I think if, talking defensively, just thinking back now, the big difference, I think, between the teams is the broken field defense. Like the Kiwis, how they hustle in defense and stop. Like you say, we made plenty of line breaks, but somehow, Hunter forces that pass, but there's Kiwis everywhere, in that picture, making the decision a lot harder. And then, when Anton Leonard-Brown puts Sevu Reese away, it's just a different kind of picture. Yep, sure, is a great amount of skill, but they hustle well in defense. Their ability to kind of get back, and whether they're illegally on the ball or whatever, they're very, very good at it. And unfortunately, you just don't get many chances in Test rugby, and we need to be better at converting them for sure.
Yeah, and I think it was 9 line breaks to 4. It was 612 run meters to about half that number as well. So it kind of showed and revealed a little bit of the picture that was what we've just been talking about. But the fact is that they still, I think it was 5 tries to 1, and 4 of those occurred in the back 3 for the All Blacks, just revealing how lethal they are. I think we also saw how much the All Blacks were up for that game. Like, that last 10 minutes of defence was just outstanding from the All Blacks. The fact that they didn't concede a try, they went down to 14 with Caleb Clark. A bit unfortunate to get a yellow card, but he was in an offside position when he played the ball shortly after a line break from Ton Wright, I think it was, across to Kellaway. So, that after a fair bit of pressure, external pressure, there's always external pressure in New Zealand. I thought it was a good response from the All Blacks and Scott Robertson's side. When we break this down a little bit and we think about the Rugby Championship, who do you think, if we're going to rank the 4 sides and the coaches, who would be most happy to least happy with the result of the campaign? It seems pretty obvious that Rassie Erasmus would be pretty stoked with claiming the Rugby Championship, but would Felipe Contepone be number 2 there?
Yep. 100%. The Felipe Contamponi showed, well, they beat every team. So that's, sure, they didn't back up, and they're very much, play one game and the next game it kind of rocks or diamonds, but there were definite diamonds there, and I think you can build from that. I think if you take away the Argentinian win in New Zealand, Scott Robinson would be pretty chuffed. I think, particularly, I thought, they didn't get a win in South Africa, but particularly that first test, they were super close and could have, that could have gone any way. But yeah, so I think it's probably a pass mark, I'd say, from Scott Robinson. He'll probably a fair bit of relief as well there. And then, I think Joe Schmidt, it's one from 5, 1 from 6. It's not great. But, did we expect that? Yeah, probably. I probably didn't expect the win in Argentina, but I think if you're going to get one win, it probably would have been that one. So, I think very much. I think Rassi will be happy because he won. He'll be disappointed that they dropped a game when they shouldn't have. But yeah, look, he can laugh all he likes, can't he? It's pretty. He's sitting pretty lovely up there.
Yeah, he certainly is, isn't he? And yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm curious. Let's dig a bit deeper there with Joe Schmidt and the Wallabies then, because I think that was the best rugby championship we've actually seen in terms of its competitiveness. The Wallabies probably not as competitive against South Africa, but the other test matches right across the board were outstanding. The fact that Argentina managed 3 wins and victories against their 3 opponents from the Rugby Championship, previously the Tri-Nations, that's a historic moment, and hopefully it's a bit of a turning point for Argentinian rugby. But if you had have said at the start of the campaign, and I know that Sam Bruce had asked me, what do you think the line would be in terms of wins for this TRC campaign? And he said he put the line at 1.5, so victories above or below that. And he said 1. I think I settled on 1 as well. That's what they've actually finished on. And you say, look, it's not a great, we probably didn't expect any more. How do you think Joe Schmidt would be feeling then? Would it be a pass for him, or would he be seeing this as a failed campaign?
I don't think it's as binary, if I'm being honest. I know we want to make it. Be. Yeah. Like I know we would, we'd like to make it that way, but ultimately, look, I think he'll be pretty chuffed with parts of it. Like I said, in Argentina, you say there's 3 good halves there out of the 4. Against Kiwis, you said there's maybe 2 good halves out of 4. Like, there are some positive signs. It's just where our start point is, and ultimately we didn't get out of the pool stage at the World Cup. He was starting from base, and I think the fact that we beat Wales, we beat Georgia, we kind of won the games we should have won, which hasn't always been the case. I think there will be, if you take all of it into context, you'd go to about maybe a pass mark or an all right mark. It's just, unfortunately, we're not blessed with kind of many other I just think we kind of expected it, to be honest, and for the right reason.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it would be too harsh to label it as a fail. Because you do have to put it in context. You've got to put in the context that the Wallabies are 10th in the world rankings. So the results and the rankings suggest that the Wallabies won't win, and they certainly won't win against the top sides that made the final, like South Africa and New Zealand last year rather. What were some of the green shoots? Because I think we started to see a little bit more detail in the attack. We've spoken a little bit about it. What are some of the things that give you confidence about the direction that Joe Schmidt's taking this side 10 months out from the Lions series?
Yeah, it's the coaching. I really do think that we have a very good coaching team. You can just see bits and pieces of it. You can see that we're building the game, and Georgia, Wales, those games, they were the games that that we might have let slip in the past, but they didn't allow that. You saw bits and pieces. Personally, I probably got nervous that second South Africa test and then the second Kiwi test, thinking, like traditionally this is where Aussies, we might fall off a bit. We had one okay performance at the start, but you can just see Joe and Laurie and Cronny and Jeff have all got, they've got their fingerprints over it, and they've probably got, an engaged group of players who believe in it, which is good, which is a start. I just don't think we have the manpower at the moment, if I'm being honest. You look at physically our team, particularly our backs. You start going, there's a lot of guys that are decent Super Rugby players, but physically, the test demands are a lot different, and it is. I think we might be a little bit underdone in that area, to be honest.
I agree, and let's dig a bit deeper there, because you look around and in the top sides in the world, they've got the Pollards and the D'Orlandes, 10 and 12 established. I don't know if Aussie rugby at the moment has a 10 and 12. I know that Paisami's played about 30 tests now, and he's been around the international game this is his 5th season, as it is Noah Lolaseo's 5th season. He hasn't necessarily played all along then, but they made their debuts in 2020. Is there enough? Are they the two that are likely to lead us against the Lions at 10 on 12, or is that position still up in the air? Because it seems to me like Noah's not commanded that jersey yet. He hasn't owned that jersey, even though he's been given every opportunity by Joe Schmidt this year. And similarly, I think Hunter Paisami was the clear standout at 12 in Super Rugby this season, but he hasn't necessarily maybe he was rushed back against the Kiwis. He probably was. He was not necessarily expected to feature there, but he takes the field, and some of his decision-making there, a couple of balls hitting the ground, the pass where he should be just taking that and recycling, what Cody Taylor often does in the tram tracks, quick recycle. What do you think the strategy over the spring tour should be regarding those two? And do you think that those positions are still very much up for debate? And if they are there actually alternatives, or do we have to just accept that these are the best couple of people we've got here?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because no, I don't think we have many other alternatives, to be honest with you. But at the same time, does just allowing the guy, if we trust them at 10 and 12, and we give them the reins and say, you're gonna have the next 5 caps, does that motivate them to play better? Are they motivated by the fact that they have confidence the coach trusts them, or is having someone nipping at your heels, or is that the way to motivate them? So I don't know, because everyone's a little bit different. You could probably say that, look, Noah, even in 2020, 2021, around there, Noah definitely got given the reins then as well. So he by no means hasn't had that kind of trust shown in him. But yeah, I think unfortunately at the moment, for Australian rugby anyway, there's not a hugely obvious alternative. And look, I think Noah and Hunter were definitely our best 10 and 12 at Super Rugby, but we're seeing the step up. Ultimately, we're seeing Hunter is an abrasive physical guy at Super Rugby. At Test, everyone's a little bit heavier, a little bit quicker, and we're probably not seeing those things shine through as much. And he has been asked a lot in terms of his decision making. Ball playing, kicking. He's distributing a lot, and it might not be his natural thing yet. But look, I think he's showing some really good signs. At least, I'd be sticking with him for sure. But yeah, I do worry about our size and our physicality in the back line. You saw the Kiwis; they were really targeting Noah. Because we use our wingers to defend at front line, and then Noah in the backfield, and you saw Beauden Barrett sitting in the pocket and just popping up a few bombs right on Noah. And to be fair, he did all right. But, teams are finding him, and teams are finding that kind of that smaller body and looking for ways to really rough him up. I think around halftime you saw TJ Perenara just going after Noah, and the other teams are seeing that as an opportunity for them. So yeah, I think we've got to stick with it, but it's not ideal.
He's 24 now. Tim Horan, about midway through the coverage, said we need to see Noah Lolesio start to boss the game. And if I just move to the NRL fixture that was after that, you saw the Panthers beat Cronulla and they actually wore them down. It didn't necessarily, it was a wet old evening and it wasn't, they didn't blow Cronulla out of the park immediately, but we saw in the decisive minutes Cleary continue to work his game into the game and then just totally own it towards the back end. And his decision-making, there was an occasion where he got the ball about 10 metres out, scrambled ball, last tackle. They'd gone to the left, they worked it back into the middle through Cleary, and then he looked up and he saw an unmarked winger there, and just the time and the poise and then the execution he had to put it on a dime for his winger to score. It kind of showed to me that this guy is at the complete peak of his powers with his decision-making and the time that he has. What can a 10 do? Like, how do they start to inject themselves and command themselves more out there? Or can some 10s just have it and other 10s unfortunately don't? Or is it something that a guy like Noah Lolesio, who was probably thrown in there way too early but has shown a potential, can that potential ever be realised, or is there a point where they can't go further?
Yeah, no, it definitely can be realised. That's for sure. The harder thing is that there's not a settled group around him. I think I'm very encouraged. I'm glad that we're talking about Noah and not Noah and Tom Wright, which is maybe 6-8 weeks ago that was the question. Tom Wright's really. He's really starting to kind of take his chances now and be the player that we wanted him to be. Physically, he looks ready for Test rugby as well. So, look, there's by no means it's the thing with the conundrum that we're kind of in Australian rugby is that if we say he's not up to it, chances are he goes overseas, and then we kind of lose him, and then they come back, when he's got a little bit more experience. So it's a really, really difficult one.
Well, we've seen that was almost with Carter Gordon, haven't we? Like, I personally think that Carter Gordon should probably be the 10, just not the goal kicker in the side at the moment. Like, it's a moot point because he's no longer around, but it's a crying shame that Carter Gordon's still not involved in Aussie rugby as well.
Yeah, definitely. Look, one of the things as a player or ex-player in Australian rugby, you notice is the longer you're gone, the more they value. It's because it's almost like whenever you're playing, results haven't been great in the last 10, 15 years. So you're losing and then you go away and then they'll forget about you. But then the team keeps losing and they go, oh, actually, we've got this guy overseas who's awesome. That's right. And then it happened to me. I by no means, no one was crying when I left. But when I come back, there's all this thing expected of me and you're kind of the new thing again. So, once again, it just, you kind of see that cycle repeat a little bit. But yeah, look, Carter, obviously massive loss. I do wonder if Noah would benefit from having like a, you saw at the Brumbies, I thought his performances were a lot better when Debrasini was coming off the bench and, even started some games. And I do wonder if maybe the weight of it is just a bit too much for him at the moment, and that maybe not, rather than just cast him aside, but just actually say, you got 50 minutes, thing will come on 30 and maybe develop that way. I'm not really sure the answer, to be honest, but he's by no means is it a nature nurture thing. I think you can definitely grow into it, and he can definitely become a much better player for sure.
It does say a lot about how Joe Schmidt's viewing the 10s at the moment, that Tom Liner didn't get on the field the week earlier and then Ben Donaldson only gets a handful of minutes in Wellington too. So I think that they think that Noah Lolesio is the clear number 10 at the moment. It's perhaps, and the reality is that perhaps it's just not an outstanding 10 at the moment. So maybe it is the fact that they're just going to have to persevere with Noah, and he's got an outstanding opportunity with 4 tests to come on this spring tour. I think it's a shame that there's not a 10 that's older than him there. I'd love I can't believe Jack Debrasini hasn't been looked at over the last 16 months. I think that he's a age profile, 30, big body, 190 centimetres, massive kick, has seen a lot, played everywhere now overseas. He's just re-signed for a one-year deal. I just can't believe that he hasn't been thought of more than what he has. Maybe it's, he probably didn't live up to the expectation as a younger guy, but he's 30, 31 now, and he seems like when he has played over the last 2 years, he's played pretty well.
Yeah, he definitely has. And look, I was watching the game and I was kind of thinking, the increased scrutiny on Noah because ultimately, Nathan Cleary's playing after, and we're watching, guys like this who light up the game, and they're the people who touch the ball the most. And I was like, Beauden Barrett didn't necessarily set the world on fire in that game. But, the same questions aren't really asked. And, it is completely different. I understand that. But I'm probably just alluding to the fact of, maybe it's unrealistic to just think he's going to be the best. Maybe it's very much just about playing his role. I'm sure there's bits and pieces you'd like to see from him, particularly around defense, physicality and kicking. Ultimately, they're not things that people get excited by, particularly at Super Rugby level, but at a test level, they're vital. Like, they're the kind of separators in the game for those guys. So, yeah, look, it's a tough position to be in.
It's a couple of weeks away before this spring tour squad is going to be announced, and as Dan Herbert revealed last week, really, 64 men are going to end up going on this trip to the UK, which is a huge number. My intel is that there's going to be 34 selected for the Wallabies and another 30 for the two matches against Bristol and England A, and they happen a day either side of the opening match against England and then the second game against Wales as well, and then the final two tests on that tour against Scotland and Ireland. And my understanding is that there'll be another 2 players from those 30 that will join the 34 men, 34 Wallabies after their 2 Australia 15 matches. So who knows who they might be? They might be guys, if there's injuries in the Wallabies camp, they might just be to fill those holes, or they might already have an idea around who those 2 could be. I wonder if Joseph Suaalii is going to be one of them, because he's already let the cat out of the bag that he's going to go on the spring tour. But interestingly, Joe Schmidt said that he hadn't actually spoken to him, and he found those comments that Suaalii said a couple of weeks ago where he said he was going to go. Interesting. So what would you do? Would you have him in the initial Wallabies squad, or would you pick him in the Australian 15 squad to perhaps get some experience back in rugby for his reintegration? And then he might not play for the Wallabies, but do you play him and pick him so he can be a training number, so he can get exposed like Marika Koroibete was at the end of the 2016 tour, and then so that 7-8 months down the track when they do regroup the Wallabies, that he kind of already knows the systems in play?
Yeah, definitely. Look, he should definitely be in that Wallaby 15 or A or whatever we're calling it, couple games, and hopefully playing. And then in the environment after that, I don't think it would be. It would be interesting if he got a game, and there'd be part of me that would feel like not yet. But Joe's made it very clear that his kind of priority is that Lions tour, and does Joseph Suaalii, does he benefit from playing on tour? Does that help his ambitions or his trajectory a year later? Look, I would think if there's an ideal world, no injuries, Tom Wright's still playing really good footy, Andrew Kellaway's a genuine option at 15, Max Jorgensen's hopefully back and looking to throw him in there, little bits and pieces, Marika as well. I think just having him around, learning the backfield, learning, reintegrating into all of that would be great. I also just mentioned earlier in the podcast that we lack that physicality, that size in the back line, and we kind of have a ready-made athlete there, which is exciting. We just need to yeah, I think we just need to get them up to speed a little bit. So I think, very much being in the Wallaby 15 and then being around the squad would be awesome. Learning from the boys who are out there, understanding the systems, and then hopefully a full Super Rugby season ahead into the Lions.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the obviously Marika Korobetti was. I thought what Michael Checker did there was outstanding. How he turned him into a Wallaby. He wasn't thrown in the deep end. He had a nice runway, and even Izzy Folau. I was reminded earlier today that Folau made his debut in rugby against the Crusaders in a trial match, and I can't imagine that there would have been more than a couple of thousand perhaps watching that game. Like if Suala gets on the field, it will be scrutinised right from the outset. Every move that he makes, every touch that he has, it'll be scrutinised by both the media in England and also back home, those watching streaming. So it'll be fascinating to see how he goes. Is there anyone else that you think might, 64 is a massive number. It's more than it's 4 15s. So the 15s from across the board in Super Rugby remaining are all going to be there. Plus, you could say a hooker from each of the sides as well, given that it's 64.
Yeah.
It's a massive number. So every man and their dog who's any good or close to the international reckoning, I think will get the call up. It's just whether or not they make the Wallabies side. I'm hugely fascinated about the 10s, and we've already probably spoken too much about them, but I can see Tane Edmund. He's definitely going to go in the 64. But he had a cracker in the NPC over the weekend. I don't know if you saw the try that he set up.
Highlights, yeah, for sure. In the big game as well, wasn't it? It was a game that mattered.
Against Canterbury, I think it puts them back in the top 8. Canterbury is the highest number of points that North Harbour have ever dished up against Canterbury as well. So I can see him featuring in the Wallabies because Tom Liner, physically, he's shown that he's not been able to stand up to the rigours yet of international rugby with all his hamstring issues. And Ben Donaldson, I just don't think has been trusted enough, and he's defensively too suspect. I can see Tane Edmund, who is a guy that tries to boss the game. I can see him getting a crack and getting an opportunity. And I don't know if he'll take the jersey from Nolan Lolosio, but I think he'll end up finding his way into that 34. Is there anyone else that you could see coming in? Like Dave Parecki has not been cited. I can see him maybe having his reintegration with the Australian 15. Then if he's going well, maybe the Wallabies after that. But it'll be a good opportunity for a lot of the fringe players or those coming back from injury to make their returns via this platform that they're going to get given.
Yeah, and honestly, I'd like to. I'd like to see some guys from overseas have a look at. I really would. I know it's complicated with Reg 9 that they can't necessarily be in the 15. It's only test matches that window opens up for. But I think why not? I don't think it's going to be a case of putting 2-3 wins together over there to get confidence. I don't think unfortunately we don't have that luxury. But look, I don't think there's going to be any, bolters. I think everything about Joe has been sensible. I think Tane Edmund's a really good shout from you. I think that's probably not. I think he's got like what we're talking about there. I think he's got the mentality of a test player. Like he's a fighter. He's physical. He's all that. It's probably just he doesn't have the skill set that Noah and other guys kind of do. But yeah, maybe that's okay. I'm not sure. He's another guy who you love to watch and you love to support because he genuinely goes hard on sleeve and gives it everything. And he doesn't, a bit like Bernard in that kind of way. He genuinely gives it all. And you kind of root for him as well. But no, I honestly think it's probably, there's going to be no bolters.
If there was overseas guys, Skelton's obviously one that you hope is going to be part of that Wallaby squad. Is there anyone else from France? Because I just don't know how many Japanese guys might be involved, given that they've been reluctant in the past, so close to their domestic seasons, to have players tour. We saw in 2021 a couple of them withdraw with guys like Quaid and Samu and no Sean McMahon either. So is there anyone else? Is it the Josh Kemeneys or the Scott CEOs that you'd be looking at, or who?
Yeah, it like obviously lock is the big one. I think if Jeremy Williams has had a really good season. Luke Kahn's had a good season, but some seasoned campaigners in there, some guys who can go up against the Lions and put some fear into them. I'd be looking at those guys, to be honest. I'd be looking at I think Will for me is one straight off the bat, and then I don't know is like what's our view on Samu these days? I don't know if we've forgotten about him, but just having some kind of bigger body.
Is that Pete Samu you're talking about?
Oh yeah, Pete Samu as well. To be fair, I was talking about Samu Karevi, but I don't think it is. Maybe I'm falling victim to the old, grass is greener. They've been away, so they must be better. But yeah, I would like to see us getting our best team together, irrelevant of geography. And I think if we're gonna call on these guys like a Pete Samu, like a Will Skelton in the Lions, then they need to be in the environment up there for the spring tour.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's park that conversation. And just a last kind of final note, the Springboks 47-7 winners over the Pumas, they absolutely thumped them. And there was a couple of cards that played a part there with the scoreline. But Marnie Lebok, he came under a lot of scrutiny for missing that match-winning penalty against Argentina a week earlier. He's given the 10 jersey, which Rassie Erasmus did say that it was always his plan to give him that role first up. But talk about a man that makes such a compelling case to have himself front and center of the box still. Like his kicking game, I don't know if you saw one of his crossfield kicks, but absolutely, like that's a skill set, isn't it? Just looking one way, kicking the other, and it showed. I thought it was just outstanding coaching once again of coach to back the 10, despite the fact that he struggled the week earlier.
Yeah, but then the 10 to kind of make the decision right, because ultimately we didn't know if it was the right decision until after the performance. So it was trusting a guy who has, but also switching the kicker. So I think Henriks was kicking, and look, he by no means set the world on fire with his kicks as well. But yeah, it just shows how you can. It's really interesting how the profile of the 10 has really changed, particularly in South Africa. It was you look at like your Mornay staying, in 20 what was it 2009 or something for the Lions tour over there, and then you look at a guy like Marnie, and they couldn't be different. They couldn't be more different. But the game's really evolving over there, and I do like how they share the responsibilities, and you could just see the weight off his shoulders because he wasn't timid in any way, shape, or form. You didn't feel any kind of emotional baggage on his side, and he was very, very impressive. And gosh, they've got some options there.
They have some unbelievable options at 10, and it's something that we don't have in Australian rugby at the moment. But it was fascinating. Final comment. It was fascinating there. You're saying, the shackles have almost been released a little bit by Lebok not having the kicking duties. And I do just think of Carter Gordon, think him being unburdened by having to find your feet in the international landscape, but also the goal kicking pressure. He could have been something pretty special, I think, had he not been tasked with that, even with the Rebels this year. It was probably the right call, but I think that he would have been able to be a much more confident player out there, and all the contract drama and the Rebels off-field stuff, I think that played a part in how his campaign finished, but also the perception that we think about him right now. But we will see him featured pretty prominently, I think, in the years to come for the Gold Coast Titans. Hey, Matt, we'll probably have a bit of a break, I imagine, before the spring tour.
Yeah, other than the Leicester Tigers, there's not a whole lot of things going on locally anyway, but we went down on the weekend, unfortunately. But
good game in Bath.
Yeah, it might be one of those ones where we're a few late nights or early mornings, or watching some replays on Sunday morning, so to get our little fix.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what you're going to do without this Monday night fix of talking code with me. But if there is a team announcement, we'll definitely be jumping. I'm not sure if Matt will. It's hard to wrestle him away from the coffee machine these days, but we'll definitely be discussing that with a special pod edition, and then coming back around the time of the spring tour. So look, until then, really good to talk, and an interesting campaign so far for the Wallabies. Joe Schmidt, 4 wins, 5 losses from his 9 tests, but plenty of work to be done. I'm Christy Doran. Thanks for joining us on the Raw Rugby Podcast.